You are listening to Proof Text, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture with Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb and Dr. Fredrick J. Long. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello, everybody. I'm Fred Long, and I'd like to welcome you to Proof Text. I'm with my good friend Michael Halcomb. And Michael, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. It's kind of the end of our winter season here in Hawaii, so we're getting a lot of rain, and some days are a chilly 80 degrees. And
that's how hot it is today.
we're
Here.
Yeah, is it?
It's getting up to 80.
We're getting some wind, and as we're recording this, it's rainy and windy outside, but a little bit sunny. So I'm doing all right though. Yeah, hanging in there. Still kind of reeling after right now as we record. It's about a week after the school shooting in Nashville, and we had some friends whose kids were in the school, 3 kids, while all that went down, and so I'm still kind of trying to process that. And then on Sunday, right as I woke up on Sunday and was getting ready for church, a congregant had texted me and said, "Hey, we can't make it to church. There's an attempted murder next door, and we've heard gunshots, and the police have everybody on the street barricaded in." And so just been a tough week trying to process some of the violence and that sort of thing. But otherwise, I'm hanging in there.
Yeah, I'm sorry to hear that. It seems like things are getting a little bit desperate for people. I think the inflation, I think we're kind of in a slow cooker a little bit. The frog. Anyway, I don't want to be panicking. I don't think we should be panicking. Move to a digital currency. We're moving digital dollar. How's that going to affect us all? I'm on reading week. I did something really fun today. I took 3 students fishing to some of my favorite fishing spots. White bass run out of Taylorsville Lake into Salt River. And we caught a good mess of fish this morning, and helped a guy. He really never had been fishing before. He caught the first fish, and he was just giddy with joy. I've got a video of him, so it was great to put a big smile on his face. We all caught fish too, which was a lot of fun. So
nice.
So it was a beautiful day. Well, we're looking at Galatians 4, verse 20. And we've been kind of spanning sections, and we're going to span it today. Like a new section is going to begin. So we've been having episodes where the breaks haven't quite fit really well, but we'll end chapter 4 nice and cleanly. But so we're going to look at 4:20 and 21. And so Michael, you want to begin by reading the text, and he's showing us the text in this app, which I haven't used it yet, except through this.
It's a great app, stepbible.com or stepbible.org, whichever one you want to use. But I'm using this increasingly. I still use BibleWorks every day, but I use this and BibleWorks, but mainly still on BibleWorks. But I love this software, and so here we go.
I was going to say, Mark Cannon used to work for BibleWorks and is part of the designers, leaders, I don't know, how do you want to call it, facilitators of this software. Yeah, a little shout out to Mark.
Yeah, he's on the board, I believe, and I'm a little behind. I'm supposed to be producing some audio for these guys, but I've just been inundated, so hopefully I'll get around to that soon. But Mark Cannon, good guy.
We went to seminary together.
Well, Galatians
seminary.
Galatians 4:20 says this, and I'll make a point or two about just pronunciation here after I'm finished. So verse 20. Ethalonde parine prosimas arti ke alaxetein phonenmu oti aporume enimin One of the things that I see here, and we see it often, we have the enclitic situation again, where the mu, right, doesn't have its tonos, its accent mark. And so it's thrown it back onto phonein. And so when that happens, just as a reminder, you essentially are pronouncing these two words as if they are one. So phoneinmu, rather than phonein space mu, phoneinmu, right? That's one of the things that I'm seeing going on here. And also, as far as using the Quinaire pronunciation, I notice a lot that students will take the word ke, super common, right? And they'll say k. Well, that's an alpha iota following, not an eta. So it's ke. So we remember that alpha iota makes the same sound as epsilon by itself. So ke here is pronounced ke, not k, right? Just like the, ke. And so the following word, alaxe, ke alaxe, right? So those are a couple things that I'm seeing there with regard to pronunciation.
Yeah, that's helpful. Yeah, that's a hard one for those of us who've learned Erasmian. I think it also is helpful to think that it rhymes with de. So that is the other main conjunction. So that's helpful. So in terms of translation, as I look at verse 19, I'm just noticing we've been talking about these verses 4:12 to 20 as being part of the transition. There's a lot of questions and whatnot. In 4:19, just prior to 20, there was a my children, which is kind of a unique thing to have. My children. I mean, he usually calls out people, brethren. He doesn't often say my brethren. So for him to use tekna here is a little bit unique, and then also mu. And I think this tekna probably is evoking the Abrahamic, the argument that he's been making about being seed and children of Abraham. So I think that's a strategic move. I'm not sure if I made that point or we made that point last time, but this relationality I think is really important. This change in tone, that's called a vocative, a direct address in verse 19, teknamu. There's that principle that Michael was talking about, teknamu. And then, so in verse 20, we see a de. Moreover, and then we have a thelon. A thelon, athelon, is an imperfect tense, and this would be an example of a conative use of the imperfect, where a wish, a desired thing, is wanted. I could wish, or I wish. Moreover, I wish that I could be present with you. I wish to be present pros umas, with you now, and to change my voice. So there's this issue of tone. The tone. He is pretty much admitting that he's had a bit of a tone, the previous verses, a little bit of an edge, and this edge has been seen in terms of content and in terms of the use of questions. So I wish, I could be wishing to be present with you now, Arti, now, and to change my voice because I am perplexed in you, or about you, or in respect to you. So the use of these prepositions, pros umas, is interesting. To be present with you. Pros, remember, as a preposition, can mark closeness. So, and this idea of to be present is significant because it's be present nearby. So it's not simply to be with you, but to be present. So par imi. So the para on the imi is marking kind of besideness. So to be present besideness, and then the pros is also marking nearness.
Yeah.
So he's not using soon with the dative; he's using pros with the accusative. Yeah. So he wants to be close by to them. Instead, he has to send this letter and do this via letter. But he's writing in such a way that his tone is perceivable, such that he says, I wish I could change my voice, the kind of voice that I have towards you right now, because I'm perplexed. I am perplexed about you. And this verb, apareo, or aporeo, I guess, this would be an example of a middle. Because, when I look at the lexical form, that verb aparume, the lexical form is aporeo. It's a contract verb, and that would make this a true middle. And so you don't see true middles. You'll see middle form verbs, and I guess they're middles, but when you have a form that is really optional, like this one, it's pretty interesting. So yeah, this is a middle form, and this verb has to do with being in a confused state, to be at a loss.
Yeah, I think thinking about middle in terms of like subject effectiveness, right? Like to move from the indicative to the mid, or not the indicative, but the to the middle voice, from the active voice to the middle voice, right? Is perhaps underscoring that depth of subject effectiveness.
Yeah. As I was looking, so I'm looking at the lexical entry. If you're perplexed about something, often you use the looks like you use the Perry with the genitive about something. But when you're perplexed because of something, you use n. Yeah. N with the dative, because of somebody, and then this verse is mentioned as an example. So so really, maybe the translation should better be, I'm perplexed because of you, not about you. Yeah. So this idea of because of, the preposition n is really supporting the dative case. So a lot of times we think of like the dative, like the prepositions as being chosen because of their meaning, but it can also be the case that the preposition is added to kind of ramp up the meaning that's in the case, because sometimes you have a case use that then the verb could be used with that case. For example, pistevo, I believe or trust, can be found with the simple dative case. If you wanted to ramp that up, you can use the n with the dative case. I pistevo en umin, I believe in or I trust in you, plural. And if you want to ramp it up again, you go to is with the accusative. So pistevo can take the dative, it can take the n with the dative, or it can take is with the accusative, which is, I think, the more marked construction, to believe into somebody, where it's very directional. So here, probably the sense of the dative is instrumental. Remember that the dative case represents case functions and meanings from the locative, the true dative, which is interest. So locative is place, and then the instrumental, which gets into means and sometimes cause. So it seems maybe like a little bit weird when we think of n with the dative, we think of in or among. That does not work here. And so this is this idea of causality. And that's a different translation. Yeah. So it's not merely I'm perplexed about you, but because of you. I'm perplexed due to what you are doing.
it's also interesting that he has to add that. So the oti aparume and mean, right? So you have the ke alaksetin fonenmu, and we've talked before many times about the fact that change was a negative
Mm-hmm.
thing. So for him to come, a forbidden thing, a looked down upon thing, for him to come out and say, and to change my voice, I want to change my voice. Well, he's giving a public admission of wanting to change. He must, so now he must qualify that. And there's a sense in which he is going to move from a sort of negative or vicious tone, or he desires to a more virtuous and positive and warm tone. So I think part of the reason that OT phrase is, or clause is there, is because he's qualifying this statement about change. That's my
Mm-hmm.
own opinion, but
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So yeah, I think we've talked about I think a lot of things
keep
there.
going.
Yeah.
I gotta close my window because
Oh,
it's starting
okay.
to rain. So you
Yeah.
keep talking.
So basically, the verb thelo takes infinitives. So that's why we have two infinitives. We've got a compound infinitive. They can take infinitives. So I want to be present and to change. So those are the objects of the infinitive of the verb thelo, put into the imperfect tense because it's an attempt to do something or a wish to be doing something. Yeah, because he is perplexed because I'm perplexed because of you. All right, so let's look at verse 21. Now, one of the things,
All right.
always look before Michael reads it.
You want me to read
Just
it?
before Michael reads it, there's no connector. There's no conjunction. This is just always look for these connectors. They help provide understanding of the information flow and structure. I'm leaning into this more and more and more. But yeah, Michael, go ahead and if you could read for us. Yeah.
Yeah. Legetemu, you nomon thelon desine. Ton nomon uk akuete. So we have an interrogative here, and you see a couple of things just in terms of pronunciation. The same principle, that whole enclitic thing. In this case, right, you can see that the mu has thrown its tonos back on the epsilon. So as I've said in a previous episode, when you get the two accents, you actually do two stresses when you're doing pronunciation. So legetemu, it's a little bit challenging. There's another thing hidden in here that we need to be aware of. When you have epsilon following a gamma, it turns the gamma into a Y sound.
Mm-hmm.
So le ye te, le ye temu. So it's a little bit, if you learn to Rasmian, that sort of thing right here could be a
Yeah.
little bit challenging, but it's not insurmountable by any means. Le ye temu. And that's interesting because right after the mu you have the u, leyatem u. It almost sounds like a stutter, right? So it's interesting. If I could break this down acoustically and do that on the
Mm-hmm.
screen, I would. But um, it's kind of fascinating to see what's going on here. It looks like we might have some sort of chiastic structure, but
Yeah.
I'm not sure. So you have the plural verb starting, then the plural verb ending. You have the nomon and the nomon, and then the telon des ine. So yeah, just noticing some things there, but it is an interrogative, so you want to inflect that as if it were a question as well.
Wow, great stuff, Michael. Really appreciate that. The mu is that's always tough for me. I think that's one of the hardest things for me is the Omicron iota
Yeah,
monophthong. Mu, yeah, mu.
yeah.
Yeah, that would have sounded very striking. Okay, so what's going on here? You start with an imperative. Speak to me. Speak to me. It's present tense, which may suggest, Let's reason this out together. Be speaking to me. Who is he speaking with? Well, they're identified by this participle clause, eu upo nomon, thelontes ine. The ones of you, the ones wanting to be under the law. Yeah, so this is a substantive participle, the ones wanting, the object of that, the complementary infinitive with wanting is to be. And what are they wanting to be? They're wanting to be upo nomon, under the law, under law. The ones wanting to be under law. So this is a direct address that's referring to the subject of speaking. So you don't have a vocative form of the article, and so this looks just like a nominative, and it's interpretive. To put the commas around it, the commas before and after this phrase would help us identify this as a vocative. So speak to me, comma, the ones of you wanting to be under the law. And then you have
tell me might be a good option there. Tell me, those of you under the law, those of you wanting to be under the law.
And then you have the question, the law, are you not hearing? Aren't you not, are you not aware? Aren't you not hearing the law? Now this is kind of interesting because it's kind of hard to translate it without expecting a positive answer. But the construction as it is isn't expecting it. Because if it were, the ook would be at the front, not right in front of the verb. So when ook is expecting a question, expecting a positive answer, it's placed at the front of the clause. So this is, yes.
Really?
Yes. So this is,
I don't know if I didn't know that or forgot that or what.
So this is tricky because I'm trying to think of a way how to translate that doesn't expect a positive answer. Aren't you hearing? Aren't you hearing what the law? Aren't you hearing the law?
Yeah, but I would say too, right, with that akuete there, I think we often miss this, like, right, the Semitic sort of equivalent to that would be our word shema, which has that idea of not just hearing, but hearing and obeying, hearing, keeping, hearing, doing. I think there's that sense to that. You're not just like the listening part, but hearing and keeping.
I think that's a fair point. I think that is a fair point, and we'll have to keep considering that as we move forward. How is it that they are called to obey? Yeah, so I think, aren't you hearing the law? I think that captures it. It doesn't mean yes. It doesn't expect one answer or the other. I think there is an expectation that they should, but I think in the English translation, it's not anticipating. Like if you were to say, are you not hearing the law? That would expect a positive answer for sure. I think it's significant that he doesn't construct it expecting the positive answer, and that may reveal something that of what Paul believes about them, and that is that they may not be able to be convinced by his arguments. That might be just a little epistemic distancing that he can't be assured that they would agree and say yes.
Could it be just like, if you just stuck with word order, the law? Don't you hear it? You don't hear it? I mean, in that way, it
Yeah,
leaves it open ended for a
yeah.
yes or a no response,
No,
depending on the
you
person.
translate it twice. The first time expected a positive answer, then the second time, bingo. I think that you hit it. So I can't remember how you did it. The law,
Yeah. The law, don't you hear it?
don't you hear it? And I think it means,
You don't hear it?
yeah. Well, anyway, I think you're understanding what we're saying. This translation is
Yeah.
tricky. We're talking about word order. There is some focus on the law. There's a violation of word order right here because normally you expect verb, subject, object, but we have the object and law first. So there's focus on the law. And he's speaking to those who want to be under the law. Now, who are these people? And this really supports the contention that I've made, and maybe Mike, I think maybe you agree, but I've really been stressing it is that 4:12 to 20 is a transition. And we have been introduced more recently to some group who want to cut off the Galatians from Paul, apparently. So they want to exclude you. So if you go back to 4:17, he says they're zealous, they are zealous for you is not good. They're not well zealous for you, but they want to
Mm.
exclude you in order that you would be jealous or zealous of them. So there's this kind of weird relationship that's going on where these missionary rivals of Paul are eager for the devotion of the recipients that Paul is writing to. And they're trying to cut them off. Now, presumably, cut them off from the truth of the gospel. This is what Paul has been striving for and argues for back in chapter 2 when he's talking about the steps that lead up to this controversy, the narrative portion of the text. Then, at the end of chapter 2, he lays out a thesis regarding faith and putting trust in God and dying to self. He develops those arguments in chapter 3 through verse 20. And then in verse 21, right here, 421, he turns to address these agitators, these missionary rivals, these agitators, and they're agitating in regard to the law and want to be under the law in a way that is not true to the gospel. This is justification in my mind to see 421 as the beginning of what's called the refutation section in a speech, where you take on the arguments of the opponents and you take them on and you mention them by name. You mention them, you call them out. And this is what Paul is doing right here. He's calling them out. So I side really strongly with Hans-Dieter Betz, even though I think I disagree with some of the disposition, the structuring of it. But the tenor of Galatians is one of defense, where you also have to attack the opponent. That's part of defense speech, is that you do attack those who are attacking you. And Paul has come under some kind of scrutiny here of some kind, that the Galatians are persuaded to leave him. They've been cutting you out. Well, who are they cutting them out from? Well, Paul. Paul is like hurt. He's like, I'm trying to form Christ in you, and he's perplexed with them. And so, yeah, this verse here, 21, is a transition to a new section, a refutation section, and Paul is going to be taking on the arguments, I think, of the missionary rivals and opponents. And we're about to see Paul addressing and arguing from Scripture and advancing a kind of argument. And it's tough. It's a tough passage. We'll see coming up. So yeah.
All right. Well, anything else on this, Fred?
I don't think so. Yeah. Focus on the law. And then Paul is going to be kind of advancing some arguments regarding the law and Abraham. We're going to see that coming up. Yeah. Well, I have a parting shot.
Do you, do
Yeah.
you think by tonomos, do you think that is he referring to the law writ large? Like, I think we've discussed this a little bit, but what is the law, right? What does he have in mind as far as the law? Certainly, it's um, has to do with Moses, but now he's going to talk about Abraham. This he's already given us this sort of argument that the Abrahamic covenant or promise came 430 years before the Mosaic law, right?
Yeah.
So do you think he's referring to strictly uh, Mosaic stuff here, or do you think it's writ larger than that?
I think he's talking about the covenant associated with the Torah, the giving of the Torah and Moses. And so the Torah was the first of the major parts of the Hebrew scriptures that was established at this time, for sure, as were the prophets. I mean, more debatable are the writings, the Ketubim section, Ketubim writings,
Yeah,
but the Torah certainly was. And I think people were trying to build daily life around obeying the Torah, and I think that's what's indicated by coming under it, is to come under the
yeah.
covenantal obligations of observance, Sabbath, food, circumcision. So
Do you feel comfortable substituting onomos with Torah or no?
yeah, I think there'd have to be a little bit of explanation, and maybe that would be a helpful translation, just so we get
Yeah,
people thinking of Torah and how important Torah is.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, that's a good
exactly.
suggestion. Torah.
Yeah,
Um, yeah,
yeah. Well, you have a. We'll,
yes,
we'll keep talking about that, but you have a parting
yes.
shot for us.
Only one who has mastered a tradition has a right to attempt to add to it or rebel against it. By
Hmm.
Chaim Potok.
All right.
Um,
Oh, he's one of my
yeah,
favorite
I
authors.
just read The Chosen.
Hmm.
Oh my
Yeah, it's a
gosh, I actually
great
listened
novel.
to it, read
Yes,
it, listened to it. Powerful, great reader. Wow, what a story. Oh my
yes.
goodness.
You should read the rest of his stuff. Davita's harp and oh man, this stuff's so
Yeah,
good.
very
Yep.
rich.
I used to have all his stuff devoured him. His writing devoured his writings for a
Yeah,
while.
I think
Yeah.
that's a good recommendation. I'm going to keep
So,
doing it. Next year, actually, our New Testament department is going to be speaking on the issue of the law. We're going to have like a roundtable discussion in the Biblical Studies Gathering
mm,
Wednesdays, and I'm looking forward to that. To really try to pin that down, understand it. It's some of my earliest work with Paul was dealing with Heike Reisenen's work on the law, and he's
yeah, yeah,
really happy to say
yeah,
Paul is inconsistent. And I just think, no, there's coherence, but it's not easy to see it. But I'd like to map that coherence
yeah.
out. I love that kind of work. So yeah, this was a great. If you've not read The Chosen or you have a chance to listen to it, it is good. It may even change your perspective on things, like we will.
It's also it's also important. Speaking of Rising, like I mean, to remember that the epistles were written across 15 or 20 years, right? And to expect that there's
Yeah,
no development in Paul's thought, I think is
yeah,
very
yeah. Me too.
unrealistic. So to say he's inconsistent is maybe a little uncharitable from my perspective, but to talk about the fact that the development in Paul's thought may have taken on, in light of the Christ event, and Christ himself might have taken on complexity, like and
Yeah,
nuance. I think
yeah.
that's a different thing. Um,
Exactly.
yeah, so we might expect that in Galatians, what he has to say about Torah or onomos is a little different than in Second Timothy. Um, or a later
Yeah,
text, right?
totally agree. And
Yeah.
in 1 Corinthians, it seems to be rather positive. But of course, he's reeling
Yeah.
the community in. They need some Torah.
Yeah.
But in Galatians, no. So what's the rhetorical situation? Yeah, what's being addressed? And where is Paul in the course of his ministry? Yeah, I do think there's development in Paul.
Yeah.
And I think it can be mapped around certain issues. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I'll throw this bone your way. I don't think the tension is so much, or the inconsistency is so much in Paul as it is in the various
Yes.
congregations he's dealing with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So it forces his hand in dealing, in speaking about Torah and law in different ways. So
Man,
that's my
and
thought.
I love to think,
Yeah.
I mean, is it possible that Paul figured this all out ahead of time or worked some of it out as he dealt with issues? I'm fine either way, but it's intriguing that he went to Sinai after his conversion or after his what's the other way to say it?
His Damascus Road
His Damascus
Damascus Road
Road conversion, or
experience,
what's
or
the other
his
C word that is used? I forget that. But I
yeah,
know,
I wouldn't
that's
call
why
it a
I'm
conversion,
putting
but
it in
that's
scare
fine.
quotes. But his change, but
Change.
but the fact that he goes to Sinai, what did he do there? It's like a pilgrimage. It must have been a pilgrimage for him to go
Yeah.
there and just ponder it. He had to have been thinking of so much. I mean, just think of the exegesis that was happening in his brain, and like almost out of the gate, he is debating uh, uh, Judeans about Messiah. It says. All right. Well, thanks, Michael. Fun way to
Yeah.
end, and we look forward to having you all listen to us. Watch us next time. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, Fred. By the way, if you're watching, I'll just throw this in there, and you're down to hit the subscribe button and or the like button, do that. And even more, if you're willing to share this, please do that. We'd appreciate it. Thanks for listening.
You too, Michael.
Appreciate you,
Bye.
Fred.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Glossa House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Glossa House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Glossa House, language resources for the global community.